In the summer of 2007, a few miles from Longview, Texas, a family of 4 crashed their car and got stuck in a storm while on a road trip. An old man offered them shelter for the night. But what happened at that old man's ranch house is more horrifying than you could imagine. Viewer discretion is advised. The sun had barely begun to rise when we piled into the car that morning. Our family road trip was supposed to be a fun escape from the everyday grind, a chance to bond and make new memories. Sarah had been planning this for months, mapping out the best routes, listing quirky roadside attractions, and booking cozy motels along the way. She was always the organized one, the planner, and this trip was no exception. The kids, Billy and Samantha, were buzzing with excitement in the back seat. Billy, with his boundless energy, kept asking 1,000 questions a minute, while Samantha, more subdued but equally curious, quietly observed the passing scenery with wide eyes. I was in the driver's seat, feeling the usual blend of excitement and responsibility that came with being the family chauffeur. We were headed west, aiming to reach the Grand Canyon in a couple of days. It was a long drive, but I was looking forward to the adventure. The first few hours of the drive were uneventful. We sang along to our favorite tunes, played road trip games, and marveled at the changing landscapes. Everything was fine until we crossed the Texas state line. The weather had been clear up until then, but as we drove deeper into Texas, dark clouds began to gather ominously on the horizon. It wasn't long before the storm hit. The transformation from a clear day to a raging tempest was abrupt and jarring. One moment the sky was a deep, serene blue, and the next it was an angry, swirling mass of grey. The rain came down in sheets, so heavy that the windshield wipers couldn't keep up. The wind howled and buffeted the car, making it hard to stay on the road. Visibility dropped to near zero and I could barely see the road ahead. Sarah kept urging me to pull over, to find somewhere safe to wait out the storm. Her voice was tinged with worry, and I could see the fear in her eyes every time she glanced at me. But I was stubborn. I thought I could handle it, that we could push through without any issues. After all, I'd driven through storms before. The answer came in the form of a sudden, violent swerve as the car lost all traction on the slick road. We careened off the highway and crashed into a tree with a sickening thud. The force of the impact jolted us all, but miraculously no one was hurt. The car, however, was a different story. It wouldn't start, and we were stranded in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by a raging storm. Panic set in as Sarah and the kids realized our predicament. We were miles from the nearest town, with no cell service and no way to call for help. The storm raged on around us, the wind howling like a wild beast. Sarah's face was a mask of fear, and the kids were crying, their earlier excitement replaced by terror. I felt a cold knot of fear in my stomach. I had put my family in this situation, and now I had no idea how to get us out. Just as I was about to try the car again, there was a knock on the window. I nearly jumped out of my skin, and Sarah let out a small scream. Standing outside in the pouring rain was an old man. He had a scraggly grey beard, crooked yellow teeth, and eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. There was something unsettling about him, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I rolled down the window cautiously. "What are you doing driving in this storm?" he asked, his voice gravelly and rough. I explained our situation, hoping he might be able to help. He listened intently, then offered us a place to stay until the storm passed. In my desperation, I didn't think to question why he was out walking in such weather, or how he had found us in the first place. All I could think about was getting my family to safety. We agreed and stepped out of the car, following the old man through the rain. It was a short walk, only about 10 minutes, before we saw the lights of his home in the distance. As we got closer, the outline of an old ranch house came into view. It looked worn and weathered, but at that moment, it was a beacon of hope. The house was even more rough up close, with cracked wooden floors and peeling wallpaper. The musty smell was overpowering, and the walls were adorned with animal heads and antlers, giving the place a macabre, eerie vibe. The old man seemed friendly enough, though. He gave us dry clothes and made a big pot of chili for dinner. The warmth and the food did wonders to calm the kids, and even Sarah began to relax a little. After dinner, the old man suggested we stay the night since the storm showed no signs of letting up. He had a guest room we could use. Part of me wanted to refuse, to find another way, but the kids were exhausted, and it felt good to be out of the rain. So, I agreed, thinking we would leave first thing in the morning. As we were getting settled into the guest room, the old man started talking about the history of the ranch house. He spoke with a strange, almost reverent tone, as if the house were more than just a building. It had been in his family for generations, he said, dating back to the 1800s when some wealthy businessman from the East Coast had purchased the land. "You know," he said with a smirk, "there's a story about how he and his wife got so wealthy." I was only half listening, distracted by the day's events and the lingering unease I felt in this house. They killed their firstborn child and offered it to the devil himself, in exchange for immense riches and fortune. He said it with such seriousness that it actually made the hairs on the back of my neck stand. Bunch of bullshit, I thought to myself, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling I got from this creepy old man. "Would you do the same, John?" he asked suddenly, catching me off guard. I turned to face him, stunned. I never told him my name. That night, after we had all gone to bed, I awoke, suddenly, unable to move. My entire body felt paralyzed, like I was being crushed under an immense force. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw a hunched-over figure looming by the side of the bed. It was the old man. Before I could let out a cry, he clamped his hand over my mouth tightly. Silence. "You don't want to wake the wife and kids, do you? Those precious little ones look so peaceful when they are asleep," he whispered, his putrid breath almost making me gag. "Now listen closely. How much do you really care for your family? Enough to let them live? Or do you want to achieve wealth and power beyond your wildest dreams?" I couldn't speak, couldn't move a muscle. The old man continued, "You see, there's a way to have everything your heart desires. All the money, the luxury, the good life. But there's a price to be paid, a sacrifice. The choice is yours. Give me what I crave most, and you'll be rewarded immensely." I knew exactly what he was hinting at. He wanted me to willingly give up my wife and children. A brief flash of money and wealth crossed my mind. Expensive cars, sweets, and power. I felt a sense of longing for it. I quickly dismissed the thought, but it was too late. "Your decision has been made," he said, a sinister smile creeping across his face. The old man turned around methodically and walked over to Sarah and the children who were sharing a bed. My entire world shattered into a million pieces. Sarah and the kids were lying in bed in an ever-widening pool of their own blood, eyes still closed as if they were just sleeping. The old man had slit their throats. It all happened so fast. I couldn't do anything but watch. I closed my eyes, telling myself it was nothing but a horrific dream. I opened my eyes again and found myself back inside the car, still on that desolate Texas back road in the middle of the storm. My head was pounding, and I was bleeding from my eyebrow. At first, I thought I must have just awoken from an intensely vivid nightmare, while delirious from the crash. But then, my gaze turned towards the back seat. My wife and 2 children did not survive the crash. I had no recollection of what happened after our vehicle went off the road. One second we were a happy family on a road trip, laughing and joking around together, and the next, we were in a crumpled heap of metal. After that night, life never returned to normal. I took to drinking, trying to drown the guilt and sorrow that plagued me. I lost my job, distanced myself from friends, and my days became a blur of empty bottles and sleepless nights. One morning, already half a bottle of liquor deep, I stumbled out to the mailbox and found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a lottery ticket and a note that read, "Your wish is my command." That morning, I won $200 million. I had unknowingly and unwillingly made a deal with the devil himself.